Hi, you guys. My name is Barb Egan. I'm a registered clinical counselor. I own a live counseling. And I'm here today because I just want to encourage moms. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a whole week dedicated to it as well. And of course, Mother's Day. And I'm a mom of three. I have a 3.5-year-old, almost 2-year old whose birthday is in May, and a newborn, so that we welcome during this whole COVID pandemic. And so while we're all at home, all counseling has moved online, all life has pretty much moved online probably too. I just want to come on and share some encouragement. I've gotten to come into Mamas for Mamas a few times and share. I specialize in anxiety and stress and depression. So working with moms, which is a large part of my practice, we see that all the time, whether it's postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, or just plain old depression, anxiety, or plain old stress. And so today I just want to give some tips. We opened up a chat box. We have some questions, so I'm going to go through those. I do compile a big resource list too, so if you do want those, just shoot me an email, barbegancounseling@gmail.com, or my website is alivecounseling.com. Head there, ask for it. I'm happy to send it to you. So, like I said, I'm a mom, so I'm right here with you guys. I'm living this, I'm breathing it, with my three little ones, all in our house. And if it's hard, well, it's not normal to be with your family 24/7 in your own home, and that's okay. And so, wherever you're at, I just want to encourage you, just be all there. Be all there with your kids, be all there with your partner, with your friends, with your family, not maybe even physically if you can't, but just emotionally. That's often the best thing that we can be to someone, is just be present, especially in pain. Be present with people in their pain. And as moms, we pour out so much to so many people and all the time. And empty cups cannot pour. So often, finding ways that you fill up your cup, even getting an image like a cup and thinking, okay, is this going to drain me or is this going to fulfill me? So, for example, exercise. Some days it fills my cup, so I get higher. Some days it drains me. Sometimes reading, that can fill my cup. It makes me feel better. Things like that. Identifying what fills you and even who. So pay attention to people in your life. If they make you feel less than, maybe limit your time if you can, or draw that boundary and not let them in. So that's really big because that takes the power back in your control. That is an empowered perspective where you control what goes into your cup and what comes out or what pours out. Sometimes life happens to us, especially financial uncertainty or loss of jobs, not knowing what's going to happen, our health. You never think it's going to happen to you until it happens to you. And so sometimes life happens to us, sometimes we happen to life. So just finding what you can control is a huge part. Even what you can control going into that cup is huge. So personally, for me, for example, I like to wake up a little bit early, even though it's really hard, have my hot coffee, and just read by myself, just even for 5 minutes. It really makes me feel really good and just starting the day off right. Some people like to write in a gratitude journal, even 3 things to start their day that they're grateful for. Some people like to end their day that way. And then throughout the day, whether that's scheduled little breaks during nap time or quiet time for bigger kids, managing homeschooling, even modeling that while your kids are doing school and maybe don't need your hands-on help, you can model study time or reading time, work time alongside of them. You could be in the same room even, but all working. So you're kind of in it together, you're bonding, you're connecting, but you're each getting your individual time together. So that's something to go through too. And through that chat box, we have a great slew of questions. So I'm just going to kind of go through those. And again, I save some infographics. I'm very visual. I like quotes. I like pictures. I like information through that. So if you want to see any of them, I post them a lot on my social media, Alive Counseling, but also just email me, barbegancounseling@gmail.com, and I can send that over to you too. So just to start, I love this quote I just saw, but it says, look how much you've already managed to adapt to. Look how resilient you've already been. There's no right way to respond to this because it's never ever happened before. give yourself some credit. There's no one in the whole world who has this all figured out yet. So it's absolutely okay if you don't either. And I love that. That takes the pressure off of ourselves to do homeschooling, to do everything that we are working from home or supporting a spouse, or maybe our work looks a lot different than it did 2 months ago and we never thought we'd be here. You're wearing a lot of hats, and that's okay. And there's this great picture that I really like of this woman juggling. And if you were to think metaphorically, what are all the balls you're juggling right now? So maybe it's cooking, maybe it's cleaning, health, school, work, social life, your family life, your marriage or your relationship with your kids, and then of course your hobbies, or that elusive self-care that we all love. And I think it's a great idea, but a lot of us struggle with, okay, practically, what does that look like? So if this woman's juggling all these balls, well, that's just not sustainable for a long period of time, and especially not in quarantine, and especially not in isolation. So pick a few that are right now your most biggest, deepest priorities. And it's tempting to say all of them, but really not all of them at once are. So maybe taking some of those out. Maybe this is the season where you don't garden, or you don't add another hobby or make sourdough bread or something like that. And you just need to focus on your family and your health, especially if there's immune compromised people in your family and you're caring for them. That's even more emotional weight that you're carrying. When we boil down our focus into 1, 2, or 3 things, we have more capacity. We have more breathing room. So for this too, it could be that maybe gardening, like that example earlier, is actually an outlet, and you need that. And you don't want to just focus solely just on your kids or just on yourself or just on cleaning, because then it's very imbalanced. Everything else goes out of whack. And sure, not everyone carries the same weight. Maybe a clean house, as much as that can overwhelm us, because our physical space that's cluttered can make our mental space feel very cluttered and very anxious. But maybe in this season, there's more grace. There's more grace for yourself. That kids are at home, they're home all the time pretty much, and so it's going to be messier. And one day you're going to look back and you're going to long for the mess again. And I know, I'm right there and there. I have little ones too. And trust me, I don't long for the mess every day. But I know I hold on to that one day I will. And I try to view it that way of, Lord, help me to see them, not the mess. And so whether that's your faith or just a friend to call on, but even just saying, help me to see them and not the mess. Picking even one thing of each child throughout the day that you really want to call out in them, kind of speak life into them, which can be hard if you have strong-willed children like me. So far my newborn's not strong-willed, but I'm just giving it some time. So on some days, those meltdowns, those tantrums, those big emotions, that was a theme of some of the questions in the chat box, is how do I help these little people manage these big emotions? And that is really hard. That's all about parenting, basically. And especially as a mother, we are the nurturing image to them. We model it. And kids at that age, actually most ages, don't necessarily know how to name their emotions. When we name it, we can tame it. So for example, I really like, it's called a feeling wheel or a feeling chart, but it's basically the circle, and it has a bunch of the feelings. So it breaks it down into the core ones like sad or fear, but then there's more words that build off of them that are similar. So that could be from fear, overwhelmed, spread thin, stressed. So for me, when I'm feeling those things, I get more irritable. I'm more short. I have a shorter fuse, so things bother me more. And of course, nobody wants that about themselves, but we're human and that happens. So often irritability or that short fuse is a symptom of just being too stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, which at this time of uncertainty, that's very normal. And there's a lot of power in that knowledge of just being able to notice that in ourselves. When we can name it, we can tame it. Otherwise, it controls us. So it could be as simple as in yourself, first recognizing that I'm spread thin, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I'm fearful of blank. And try to be as specific as possible if we can put an emotion to an experience. So, for example, I keep getting work emails, and every time I see it on my phone, it makes me kind of tense up. I feel it in my body. I can feel my breath kind of get short and rapid. My chest is a little more beating. I'm a little more hot, a little more flushed. Okay, that's anxiety. Often our body tells us before our mind clues in. Now that I know, that knowledge is power. I know my physical symptoms, then I can look at my mind symptoms. Okay, so that's my anxiety. I'm going to name it. I'm feeling anxious or stressed. Okay, and why? Specifics. Well, I keep getting these emails and it makes me feel like I'm behind. Okay, now let's challenge that. Is that 100% true that I'm behind because I'm getting emails? No, I'm just getting that constant reminder, whereas before maybe we had boundaries with work and home, and now it's very muddy. Now you're at home working. You're not necessarily working from home. You're at home trying to work, and that's hard. So just being able to name it to tame it gives us more awareness instead of like, oh, why am I snapping? Or why was I so short? I don't want to be like that. And then the mom guilt comes in too. So name it to tame it. Helping our little ones with these big emotions is huge because we first need to see it in ourselves and then teach them. So when we can teach them, there's a whole theory in psychology called attachment theory. But basically, in early childhood, bonding with our caregivers, a strong relationship, a strong connection, a strong bond or attachment there. We feel safe. Then we're brave enough, we feel safe enough to go out, explore, and then know that we can always come back. That definitely lays the foundation for the future relationships of our kids, of friendships, romantic relationships, as parents themselves. There's more correlation to them doing better in school, of leading well, living well, loving well, all of those great things. And the cool part is it starts just now with you, probably exactly what you're doing. And all of us can improve, but we don't have to be perfect at it. I call it imperfect progress. And a lot of grace. But basically, it's naming it to tame it, knowing it in yourself first. Okay, I'm feeling stressed or spread thin. Now that knowledge is power, I get to choose what I do with that. So I could keep acting that way, keep checking my work emails, or keep trying to frantically do this and all those juggling acts before with that analogy. And I'm just going to keep getting more spread thin, more anxious, more overwhelmed, more irritable, more drained of that cup. But now with that knowledge, I can say, okay, my emotion is trying to tell me something. So in this case, my feeling of fear or overwhelm or anxiety is actually just trying to tell me something. It's kind of like I'm driving along and on my dash of my car, a check engine light comes on. So that's that uncomfortable emotion, check engine light. I could ignore it and I could probably keep going for a while. And I've done that. But if I stop and get it checked out by someone who's a professional in it, like a mechanic, then they can help me with it. And then I can be more stable, more secure in my own self, my own emotions, my own mental health, which then pours out to all those around me, my relationships, my kids, everything I do, that attachment theory. Well, that mechanic, it can be a counselor, it could be a mental health professional, it could be even a friend or a family member. You don't always need set counseling maybe, but again, it can often help us. And before I was in counseling personally, and I think we could all benefit because we've all got stuff. And so naming it to tame it in ourselves, help us to name it to tame it in our kids, help them identify what they're feeling and get down on their level, like eye level with them, speak in a soft voice, a good tone, and just try to help them name it. Oh, I see that you're really frustrated that your sister took your toy, or that you were interrupted, or you're having trouble with this math problem. I would be frustrated too, but let's work together to get this. You'll figure it out. I believe in you. I know you can do it. So when you help them name it, you help them tame it, you validate it. Oh, I can see that I would be frustrated too. And you encourage them that you're in it with them. They're not alone. Because any of that fear, that anxiety, which we already were an age of anxiety, but now you add a worldwide pandemic, well, that's a lot of anxiety. And anxiety thrives on isolation and avoidance. So we're kind of in isolation, but we have our families, which is a huge part right now. but that avoidance of, oh, this thing makes me anxious, so I'm going to avoid it. But by doing that, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So those emails that come up, if I just ignore them, or a text I don't reply, my anxiety around it actually gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So one of the questions too was, how do I kind of adjust back to normal life after this? And in short, it's gently facing your fears. It's not jumping right into the deep end without floaties. That's not smart. But it's not sitting on the edge of the pool, even just putting your little pinky toe in either, because then you miss out on so much. So one example that I want to kind of go through today is I work out of cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT. It's a really fancy word for basically our thoughts influence how we feel, which influences what we do. So it's probably the most common treatment of anxiety and depression too. So I want to walk through what I call a fear ladder, but basically what you identify as one of your fears, especially when you are going back into normal life. Step one, just start to identify your fear. So for example, let's say it's riding a bus or going out to the grocery store with your kids. Write it down. Our fears lose a lot of power when we physically write it down. And you could do it in your phone. There's this app called Mindshift that is put out by Anxiety Canada. It's free. I really like that one. Your notes section of your phone can be a useful tool, but I'm pretty old school. I like pen and paper. So step one, identify your fear. Fear of riding the bus or being around people again. All right. Step two, that would be to brainstorm some steps. This is when we're just going to kind of throw out any ideas to get our brain going, kind of like a warm up if you're going for a jog. So it's easier to face something you're afraid of by taking smaller, easier steps. Think of some steps that you could take to face the fear. Maybe it's not going on the bus right away, it's looking at pictures of the bus, or having a friend that you could go with, or someone you could call as a support system. Some steps will be easier, some will be harder. And so again, write these out. But some good examples could be that fear ladder that I talked about. So kind of working up from the fear and then backwards. So let's say my step, and I'm going to rate my anxiety out of 10 because that's a really good tool that I can use, just like Name It to Tame It in myself, to help my kids then be able to rate it in them. So that it's not always when I feel something uncomfortable like anger, or anxiety, or sadness, or fear, it's 10 out of 10. But when I put a number to it, it can come down slightly. So even at a 6, it's more manageable than a 10. So again, that empowered perspective. But those steps to that fear ladder, it could be, let's say I'm going to rate my anxiety to ride the bus to school or to work on my own without a cell phone. That sounds like 10 out of 10. Like that's a lot. Okay, that's too much. How about ride the bus all the way to work or school on my own? Okay, that's still a 9. That's pretty high. And again, we're just brainstorming things. Ride the bus for 3 stops on my own without a phone. Okay, 7. That's still pretty high. Ride the bus for several stops on my own, but I have my phone, so that makes me feel better. Okay, a 5. Ride the bus for 1 or 2 stops on my own. Okay, more manageable. 4. Ride the bus for 3 stops with a friend or a family member. Okay, that's like a 3 out of 10. I think that is somewhere that I could start with. So again, that brainstorming, you're kind of facing that fear, exposing yourself to that fear. We call it exposure therapy before you actually do it. So not starting with going right on the bus on your own to work. So that's a lot of new stuff at once, back in this normal life, this new normal. But maybe I ride it just for 3 stops with a friend that I feel safe with. So again, kind of naming it to tame it, that check-in, facing your fears, writing them down, brainstorming some ideas, checking it off out of 10, and then just trying to sum up, because a lot of these good questions can kind of be summed up in these kind of 10 tips I'm going to end with. But how to look after your mental health during a time of uncertainty. So you are probably likely in a period of a time that you're going to worry a lot about yourself, about your work, about finances, about your kids, and you're carrying a lot of stuff at once. Teacher, cook, cleaner, mom, wife, girlfriend, friend, spouse, partner, mom, daughter, all of these things. So, taking care of yourself, again, pouring into yourself is going to be the best way you can pour out to your kids. So, number one, maybe that's just keeping in touch, intentional touch with friends and family members, just to talk to them, just to stay in communication with them. Yes, your immediate family in your house, but also friends. Maybe it's a time that you can just check in on friends and build up that friendship of, hey, I'm just thinking of you. How are you guys? Or family members. Or, maybe it's time to speak to a counselor or a mental health professional. That often can't hurt. We often leave feeling better than when we came. But it's important to talk about it, because when we just hold on to it, it grows and grows and seems so much bigger than us. Number two, think back to some past experiences that you've been stressed, but you've coped well with uncertainty or the unknown, and pick out what really helped you feel better then and what you could do now. So maybe it was journaling, maybe it was exercise, maybe it was talking to someone. On the same side, think of experience can be the best teacher of ways that you didn't cope so well. Because we don't have to be defined by our mistakes, but we could know now that, okay, this did not serve me well, so I'm going to choose not to do that. I'm going to choose to do this instead. I'm going to cope like this instead. I'm going to download this MindShift app, or I'm going to read more, reach out instead of XYZ. And again, there's no judgment, no pressure, because we've all made mistakes and we all have stuff, and none of us cope well 100% of the time, even therapists. And then three, take each day just one step at a time. Again, similar to that fear ladder, break it down. Focus on the present. Just a good routine can kind of help too, of especially if you're homeschooling right now or with the kids or working, of really writing it out, that routine each day. Okay, this is work time from 9 to 11, and we're going to go outside for a walk, come back in, have some lunch, and then the afternoon it's going to be work time again for school or actual work, and that sort of thing. So a routine can be really good. Again, it doesn't have to be set in stone. It can be fluid and kind of morph as your family's needs morph. 4, in times like this, increase your focus on self-care, but self-kindness in particular. Breathe, slow down, allow yourself to connect, not just on your phones or devices, but connect with nature, go for a walk, connect with yourself, journal, have some me time or alone time. Connect with each of your kids or your family as a whole too. Connect with your spouse or your partner. Allow that connection time to be organic, with no pressures to be anywhere or do anything. And it can actually be a very enjoyable time. But increase that self-confidence, that self-care, that self-kindness can be really that, morph out of that. Speak to yourself like you would a friend. Often we're much harder on ourselves than we would ever say to anybody else. But try to consciously speak to yourself like you would a friend. So 5, you're likely to be having a lot more of these worry type feelings. You're going to have a lot more worries lately, and that's okay. Know that there's a beginning to this and an end. This is not going to go on forever. This is our new normal for now, but not forever. Even write them out. Again, when we get them out of our head onto a piece of paper, it's very freeing, and it frees up mental capacity or mental real estate. So that it's like if you're redecorating your room. If you just put a lot of clutter in and you just keep throwing it there, but you never go through it, it's just going to take up a ton of room. You're not going to want to look at it. You're going to want to avoid it, which we know with anxiety, it grows, and that's not good. So why not take some time to declutter, free up that room so you can actually go in, put some nice furniture in there, and just enjoy it. So write out those worries. Look at it from a more balanced perspective. Think of some other ways that worry could play out. Play out that worst case scenario, and then play out the more realistic one. Again, rate it out of 10 or 100. Out of 100%, the likelihood that this is going to happen, my worst case scenario. Well, it probably isn't 100 out of 100. Maybe it still feels like pretty high, 80. But again, 80 is more manageable than 100. And then from 80, I can use some of these self-care strategies, the journaling, the writing it out, speaking to someone, exercise, sleep, nutrition, getting a good routine, and then before I know it, I'm back down to like a 30. So there's still worry, there's still some of that unknown because we're in a time of unknown, but it's not taking over my life. So rating it out of 100, that could be really helpful. And that leads me to number 6, rumination. Rumination is dwelling on a worry or replaying it over and over and over again, or a negative thought, negative self-talk. So again, by asking us what a friend would say to us in this situation, or what I would say to a friend, that can help kind of jolt us out of rumination. Rating it out of 100, so it's not so true, can as well. So is this a thought or is it truth? Is it a thought or is it truth? Because everything I think isn't necessarily true. So for example, if I told you to get up right now and say, I cannot walk and talk, I cannot walk and talk, but you're walking around your living room while you do this, I cannot walk and talk. Well, that's a thought, that's a self-talk that you're saying out loud, but that's not true because you're actually proving yourself wrong. You're walking and you're talking. So don't let yourself dwell in it. You want to process it. You want to validate it. I'm feeling blank, but talk to yourself kindly. I'm feeling overwhelmed right now with managing everything I am, with homeschool, cleaning, cooking, work, being a friend, being a spouse, being a mom. Validate it. Yeah, talk to yourself like you would a friend. Yeah, I think anyone in that situation would. That would be overwhelming. What can we do to help? So reach out, speak to yourself that way. And again, reach out to people, whether it's a counselor or a friend or a family member, to get that support because we deserve it during this time. We've never been here. And then finally, write down a list of helpful facts that you want to stay focused on. So when your mind wanders, you can go back to them. So for example, what ifs drive anxiety. Ground yourself with what is. So what is true for right now? So maybe a fear is about losing a job. Well, the what is that you are still working. You maybe have decreased hours, decreased finances, but you're still working. And you're still showing up. You're still doing your work. You're still doing what you need to continue to work. So the what is versus the what if. Again, the last 8, 9, and 10 are going to be eat, sleep, nutrition. When we're eating well, exercise, sleep, nutrition. Exercise is huge. It produces endorphins, the happy hormones. It decreases the stress hormones that drive anxiety and depression. And that exercise, although we can't be at a gym or things like that, there's a lot of great programs out there online. So like TWP, the Women's Place, is doing awesome online stuff. A lot of the gyms are. There's things online, I know, but in a home workout, yes, it's not the same as a gym, but even a run, a walk, a hike can be so good for the soul. So good. And you're getting outside. That's really good. So that exercise, number 8. Number 9, exercise, sleep, good sleep. Everything is worse on little sleep. And I have little kids. I have a newborn. So I know that too. I'm like in the thick of it. But it really is. And with anxiety, we usually have trouble falling and staying asleep. So staying off your phones, turning the night shift mode on so the blue light's not on, activating your eyes and your brain, kind of an hour before bedtime, turning that phone off, trying to read an old-fashioned book or writing down 3 highlights from the day, 3 things you're grateful for, or even 3 things you accomplished. That could be eat, sleep, shower that day. That could be a walk, read your book, or had quality time with your kids. You were really present. That's huge. And then, so finally, nutrition. So exercise, sleep, nutrition, of those last 3. We are what we eat. And often when we're eating kind of processed foods, sugars, that sort of thing, it can trigger inflammation in our brain, which leads to stress and feelings of anxiety and feeling low energy levels, which makes us feel more lethargic, less kind of upbeat and happy and so forth. So pay attention to what you're eating, trying to do your best for a well-balanced diet. And again, all of these are progress over perfection. You do not need to be perfect. You have permission to have lots of mistakes in them. It does not mean that you're a mistake. It just means that you're imperfectly perfect. And you're modeling then to your kids too that you don't have this pressure to be perfect. You can just be you. And there's so much grace for that. So thank you guys. Again, my name is Barb Egan. I own Alive Counseling. I just want to encourage you, have a great Mother's Day. I hope maybe one or two of these things can help speak to you, pour into you as you're pouring out, and just know that you are handpicked to be your little one's mom. There's no one else in the world that is more equipped, both with our shortcomings and our strengths. But you have a unique ability to speak into each of your children's lives, to meet them where they're at, to be kind to them, to show them grace. And that first just begins with being kind to ourselves, pouring into ourselves so that we can pour out, and giving grace to ourselves too. So find your tribe. We can't do this alone. Keep just encouraging each other and spurring each other on. And that's so important right now. So I hope you guys have a great Mother's Day. And again, this was just my honor to be able to share with you guys and my little Mother's Day encouragement to you. Okay, bye.